All right, our next section is section 7.4. This is factoring quadratic trinomials again. The difference is that there is going to be a number in front of the x squared. What you learned last week is where that number was the number 1. It wasn't even there. It just started off with x squared. Now we're going to move in where it's going to be another number besides 1. So there's actually going to be a physical number there. So again, the book is a big fan of this whole guess and check thing. This can be extremely time consuming. Yes, it works. Sometimes you're lucky and the first or second try that you guess and check works out for you and it'll be quicker for you. Other times you may have to go through 12 different guess and checks before you finally get the answer. It just happens to be that through trial and error, the one that you tried happened to be the 12th one that was the correct answer. So I'm going to show you both ways. I'm only going to do the guess and check the very first time, and then I'm not going to do it again because it is extremely time consuming. And it's your choice. You can check every single answer. You can do that by foiling your answer back out and see if you get what you began with. The guess part is the part that we're not going to do. I'll do it once and then you can decide what you like better. Okay, so for this first quadratic trinomial, notice that my a value is 4. Now, there are some strong similarities here to what we did in last section, but it's not the same thing. That number in front of x squared changes things a bit. So here, in order to get that first term of 4x, I can get that by doing two things. I can multiply x and 4x, or I can multiply 2x and 2x. Depending on which ones you multiply, whether it's the x and the 4x to get the 4x squared or 2x and 2x. You don't know when you're doing the whole guess thing. You don't know which one it's going to be. So that's the first thing you need to take into account. The second thing you need to take into account is how are you going to get this 15? That 15, again, that one's not too bad because there's only two ways to go about getting 15. You can either multiply 1 times 15 or 5 times 3. Now notice I also had to check with the 15, I have to flip them around because I have to check every possibility. So like I said, this can be very time consuming. So what's going to make this the correct answer is I need the middle term to be 16. So you really only need to multiply to get that middle term. But when you're checking to see which is the correct answer, you're going to multiply out. See, if I multiply x times 4x, I know I get 4x squared. And I know the 1 times 15 is going to give me 15. Again, I need the middle one. So I need to know what the x times 15 would give me 15x. And 1 times 4x would give me 4x. That would give me 19x as my middle term. So that's not the correct answer. Okay, here, first and the last would give me 1x. 15 times 4 is 60. This would give me 61x. Not my correct answer. Next, I've got 3 times 5 is 3x. 5 times 4 is 20x. This would have given me a middle term of 23x. Here I have 5x. Here I have 12x. Very close with 17x, but not the correct answer. So next, again, I don't need to test out what 2x times 2x is because I know that's what it's going to be. And I don't need to check out what 1 times 5 is. I just need to multiply the two together to look at my middle term. So I'm going to multiply 2x times 15, which gives me 30x. 1 times 2 is 2x. So this one gives me 32x. Not the correct answer. Next, 2x times 5 is 10x, and 3 times 2 is 6x. There's the correct answer. So you would have to come up with all these different options. I had them pre-written just to save time, but you would have to sit there and you would have to keep guessing all the different possibilities. My final answer, my answer to this question in factored form is 2x plus 3 and 2x plus 5. If those are written out of order and you wrote the 2x plus 5 first and the 2x plus 3 second, that's the same thing, no problem. So as you can see, this is time consuming. It's just a lot of needless work to have to do this. Again, if you were really lucky and you guessed the first one and it just coincidentally happened to be the correct answer, great. That would have been time saving for you. However, that doesn't always happen, and that's why the average time consumed on these problems is better time spent better elsewhere. Okay, so we're gonna do the other way. Now, this is not in your textbook. They don't write these steps down in your textbook. This is what they keep telling you to do, is guess and check. So this happens to be a way that I learned from a math teacher a long time ago, and it's just kind of stuck. It's the way that's, and when you get good at it, you could do some parts of it in your head. There are other ways out there, and by all means, there's Google, and have fun, and you can start Googling your own way to do these. Some 8th grade teachers might have taught you a cutesy little way too, but this is the way that I'm going to focus on. So it's either going to be this drop-down method, or you can go with the guess and check, unless you like some other way. All of these ways do require some work to be shown. It's not something that can be magically done in your head. So even if you were to use another method, I'll see work that way. So whatever works for you, but this is the one that I'm going to focus the attention on. So when you're doing your homework, you might want to screenshot the steps here and just keep it up in the corner of your screen while you're doing the homework problems and things like that. So some people call this the drop down method. Some people call it the drag down method. Some people call it splitting the middle term. So if you were to Google any one of those, that's what it may come up as. It's all the same way. So I'm going to take the exact same problem we just had up there, the 4x squared plus 16x plus 15. Yes, we already know what the answer is, but I want to show you how you to go about doing this. Now, the first time I go through this, it's going to be slow and it's going to take time. But because the fact that I had to have all the steps and I'm being a little dramatic and drawing it out, that's what takes a little bit longer. But as we proceed down through the other examples, you'll see that it does kind of pick up speed. So the reason why the whole drop or drag down method, where that comes from, is what you are going to do. The first thing, I want to pick a color. Let's see, what color do I want? I want, let's go pretty green. Okay, so I'm going to drop down the first and the third term. I'm going to kind of widen it up a little bit because there's going to be stuff that goes in the middle. So I'm just bringing it out a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. Now, that's step one. I drop down my first and my third terms. Now, step two is that you're going to multiply those two together. When I multiply 4 times 15, that gives me 60. Now, this is where the similarity to last week's lesson of section 7.3 comes into play. I want to look for factors of 60 that are going to add to give me my middle term of 16. So, go through them. 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, 6 times 10. So it looks like out of all of those, you want to find the one that is that adds to be the 16, and it happens to be 6 and 10. So that's the one that you are going to pick, and you are going to take that middle term of, where's my green, of 16x, and you are going to split it up into 6x and 10x. If you put 10x first and 6x second, totally fine. Nothing is wrong with that. It just happens to be the way that I wrote it. Now, once you get to this point, you now have this point right here. You have 4 terms. And if you remember from 2 sections ago, whenever you have a 4-term polynomial, to factor something like that, you are going to do grouping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group the first 2, and I'm going to group the second 2. Now, in my first group, you need to look for a GCF. The GCF in the first group would be 2x. So I'm going to take out a 2x, and that leaves me with 2x plus 3. In the second set of parentheses, you are going to take out a 5, which will give me 2x plus 3. Now, you're going to rewrite your answer. If you notice again, this is exactly what you did in section 7.2. So both of them Both my parentheses were the same. And then my other set of parentheses is simply going to be a combination of what was left, what was factored out in the front. And there's my answer. Same exact answer I had up above here with guess and check. Once again, if you wanted to check your answer, the way you would go about checking your answer is you would FOIL back out. So first times the first is 4x squared. First times the outer is 10x. 3 times 2x is the inner. 3, the last times, that one is 15. Combined your like terms. And if you notice the exact same answer, that is what you had on your, that's what I started out with. So I know I did the correct thing. Okay, moving on to the next example. I'm going to go through the same thing. I don't have the steps written out to the side, but that doesn't matter. I will just do the problems out loud. Okay, drop down, 20x squared. Now make sure you bring down the sign that's in front of it. So here I had -5. So when I multiply those two together, that gives me -100. So I need them to add up to be 21. So I'm going to go down the list. -100, that's definitely not it. 2 and 50. -50 and 2, no. 4 and 25, there she is. I'm not going to go any further. So I have -4x and +25x. Once again, if you want to put the 25x first and the -4x second, that's fine. You'll end up with the same answer towards the end. So grouping, I'm going to take the first two, group them, and the second two and group them. In my first group, I can take out a 4x. That leaves me with 5x minus 1. In my second group, I can take out a 5, and that leaves me with 5x minus 1. So my final answer is 4x plus 5 times 5x minus 1. Now, every single one of these, as long as you can find factors from your little list of factors that add up to the middle term, that means that this problem can be factored. So if you get down to this stage right here and your two sets of parentheses are not the same, that means either you picked the wrong set of factors or you did something else wrong, incorrect somewhere, because it has to be able to have the two parentheses be the same. All right. Let's look at the second one, number 2. I'm going to drop down my first term, drop down my last term. That's -24. Again, I'm going to go through the factors. I want them to be -2. That's my middle term is -2. So I have to see what's going to give me -2, if anything. 2 and 12, no. 3 and 8, getting closer. That's 5. Here I've got -4 and +6. That gives me +2. I want -2. So my two factors are going to be 6x and 4x. Next step is going to be to group. I'm going to take out my first GCF, which is 3x. That gives me x minus 2. In my second group, I can take out a 4, and thankfully that also gives me x minus 2. And then from here, my answer, 3x plus 4, x minus 2. Again, you want to write it like this. It's fine. Most of these questions for your quiz are going to be multiple choice. So it doesn't matter. Just know that it can be written either way. It's very specific, though, which one has a subtraction sign and which one has an addition sign. All right, number 3. Drop down the 9x. Drop down +4. So I'm going to multiply those, and I want 36, but I want them to add to give me -15. Now, since 15 is negative, I'm only going to consider the negative factors of 36. I'm not going to bother with the positive ones because there's no way that I can get too positive to get a negative for my middle term. -3, -12, there she is. So I'm going to split this into -3x minus 12x. Now, grouping. When I go to group this, notice there's a subtraction sign. This is the first one of today's lesson that has a subtraction sign there. So if you remember from 7-2, I want to include that subtraction sign when I go to factor. In my first group, my GCF is 3x. That gives me 3x minus 1. In my second parentheses, because there is a negative sign in front of that 12, I need to factor out the negative form of the GCF, which would be negative 4. The reason I want to do that is because it starts with a negative, and I need to change the sign here from positive to become negative to match the other parenthesis. So my final answer is 3x minus 1 times 3x minus 4. Okay, question number 4. Drop down 2x squared, drop down negative 15. I want them to add to be negative 30. So negative 1, this is where you're going to have one positive, one negative. You're going to go down the line of all the factors that you can multiply to get 30. Thank God there's not too many. And you want them to add to be negative 6. However, when you look at the list of factors, not one of them adds to be negative 6. So this one is our first one that is prime. Again, in the homework assignment, on the whole page, I think the homework page has, 63 questions on that page. You're not doing all of them, don't worry. But out of all of those, I think there's maybe one on the entire page. So again, it's not very common, but it is possible. So the answer is prime when none of the factors add to be that middle term. Okay, number 5. Now, this is the first one where your A value happens to be negative. Well, before you can do anything with this, you need to factor out that negative sign. It's mandatory. You have to do that. That brings you to this quadratic trinomial. Now, I'm going to do your drop down here. So this gives me 2x squared. This gives me positive 7. 14 is the term that I want them to multiply, and I want them to add to be 15. Well, you've only got 2 choices, and of the 2 choices, you get 1 and 14x. So I'm going to split this up into, if you want to write 1x, that's fine, because that's not your final answer. That's just what's going to be written in your work. So if it helps you, put the 1x. If you're fancy, you don't have to write it, no big deal. So in this first one, I can take out an x. That leaves me with 2x plus 1. In my second set of parentheses, I can take out a 7, and that leaves me with x plus 1. So I have 2x plus 1 and x plus 7. The one thing you have to remember is that negative sign. The negative sign that you factored out at the beginning has to come down, and you have to rewrite it down here. If you forget that negative sign, that's going to cost you, and you're going to end up getting it wrong. It unfortunately gets forgotten all the time. That you forget when you factor it out to put it back down in your answer. Again, it's just represented by a negative sign, not a negative 1, because we don't usually put, it's the same reason if I wouldn't put this, I would just put that as my final answer. So you won't see the 1 there. Now, what I want you to work on is page 484, 8 through 20 evens. I think that's like 7 questions. Work on them, and then we'll report back to Zoom in a little bit.